And this question is actually addressed to the Bruin Democrats. So, you guys have 2 minutes.
Okay. Firstly, I'd like to thank the PSSO for putting this together. We hope this is going to be as much fun as last time. California's recent move to raise the minimum wage is a crucial step towards reversing a trend that's been occurring in this country for the past 40 years. Since 1970, we've seen corporate profits rise, while the labor share of income has decreased. Wages have stagnated despite increases in productivity and inflation. The main problem underlying all this is that workers are largely deprived of the ability to negotiate for higher wages, partially due to the decline in union membership. An increase in the minimum wage will help to reverse this trend by allowing low-income workers to live prosperous, financially secure lives, which will in turn allow them to be greater contributors to the economy. Barack Obama supports a federal raise of the minimum wage to $10.10. According to a recent study, if this had been instituted in 2011, 58% of the nation's 10 million working poor would be raised out of poverty. The bottom line is that no one in this country who works full-time should have to struggle to make ends meet. And this legislation to raise minimum wage will help to accomplish, to help end that trend. Many economists argue that a raise in the minimum wage might increase unemployment. But we've seen in certain states that have raised the minimum wage that this has not always been the case. And one of the main reasons is that humans are not commodities that businesses will just purchase less of if there's an increase in the cost of labor. The relationship between employer and worker is more complex than that, and businesses will not just fire people drastically if there's a raise in the minimum wage. So I think it's important to consider that the most important effect of the minimum wage increase will be the increase of demand that will occur when we have minimum wage workers who earn more income, and they'll put this income in the economy, which will in turn have a multiplier effect. As businesses make more profit due to this extra income, it will lead to more growth, and then businesses will be able to hire more people, and this cycle will continue until we see long-term economic prosperity. And this will negate the impact of whatever change in unemployment results.
So, thank you.
So next come the Bruin Libertarians.
All right, so our stance is that we are against the minimum wage. It's just extremely inefficient. First of all, it causes unemployment because it ends up costing more for companies to hire labor. It's the same thing, for example, if McDonald's increased prices of Big Macs. If they went from like $5 or $10, however much it is, people are going to end up buying less Big Macs, so there's going to be an extra amount of Big Macs at the end of the day. Or in terms of the labor market, is a lot of extra labor or unemployment. And it really ends up hurting the least skilled, because those who are just trying to start off and get jobs, like teenagers, for example, cost more to train, so they're going to be hired less. And that's it. We actually can see that every time that there's a spike in minimum wage, there's a spike in teenage unemployment. Additionally, it causes a large amount of inflation. The Democrats briefly mentioned that there has been inflation, but it's partly caused by raising the minimum wage, because it increases the costs that companies have to pay for. So instead of having less labor costs, when you increase the minimum wage, they have to pay more, their prices increase. So although people are maybe making a bigger dollar figure, they're not going to be able to buy as much. So between those two are the main reasons why we're against it.
Great, thank you. And then finally the Bruin Republicans.
Okay, so I think traditionally the Democratic Party likes to paint a picture of the Republican Party that is against the impoverished from having money, or against the middle class from getting ahead. And they like to say that corporations, or that we'd like to have a lower minimum wage so that corporations have more money in their pockets. But the reality is just isn't true. Democrats and Republicans want the very same thing, and we want the middle class to be able to get ahead and to make ends meet, and to be able to put food on their table and have a roof. But the liberal method just doesn't work in that they want to raise the minimum wage. I encourage everybody to do the research on the matter, but let me give you these facts. Raising the minimum wage is helpful to those in well-established jobs that are already fiscally healthy members of the middle class. What it detracts from are the low-skilled workers who now demand more jobs in a market where those supply of jobs was just cut by this minimum wage hike. In 2007, 2008, and 2009, the minimum wage was raised by 70 cents each year. And from 2006 to 2010, the unemployment rate for people ages 15 to 24, which represent a significant portion of the low-skilled workers, their unemployment rate rose from 10.5% to 18.4% nationally. It's appalling that the Democrats would ignore such an important part of our workforce. It discriminates against those in the workforce. It doesn't empower them to do better. And furthermore, it's fact that when consumers' wages are inflated across the board, the market responds by increasing prices of normal goods. And these price increases further discriminate against those in the job market that are losing work because of this minimum wage increase.
Thank you. I would like to say that I'm really impressed at how much argument you can fit into 2 minutes. Now we have to start all talking faster because you have 1 minute rebuttal. Democrats?
So as expected, you get the general argument that you get from any economics professor you take. Increase in the minimum wage will undeniably increase unemployment, which is the simple graph they show you every Econ 1 student. But the truth is, it's a complex issue, and we've seen states institute higher minimum wages with very marginal impact on unemployment. There's other factors you have to take in. One is that people who make more, if minimum wages earners start making more money, they're going to be more productive because they'll feel better about earning that extra $2 or however much it is. And the second big thing is there's going to be a decrease in turnover if we raise minimum wage because people won't want to, minimum wage earners won't want to switch from job to job as much if they feel secure in earning a higher minimum wage. And this will reduce costs for businesses because they'll have to review applications less, and just this general decrease in turnover is a big part of it. And lastly, I just want to address inflation.
Sorry.
Thank you, Democrats. Libertarians, 1 minute.
Yeah, a couple things. The Democrats said how they can't negotiate for higher wages because there's a decrease in union membership. Unions actually decrease the amount of rights that people have to negotiate for their labor because there's a collective bargaining agreement rather than an individual bargaining. Also, the idea that certain corporations won't just fire people willy-nilly is not really realistic. It's very idealistic. I mean, the Republican candidate who in his last election said he likes to fire people. So I mean, that's kind of telling. Also, you mentioned that economics, you learn in any Econ 1 class that minimum wage has an increase in unemployment, and it's kind of telling that you learned that in the fundamentals of economic class, that's it.
Thank you. Libertarians, Republicans, 1 minute.
Okay, so the issue was brought up that raising the minimum wage actually increases the demand for these jobs, and you're right, it does. But we have to point out that the workforce is not mainly on the minimum wage. The people that you see on minimum wage are people ages 15 to 24 like us, and other people that are concession workers at movie theaters and various other jobs. What it does for them is the companies that employ these minimum wage employees, they have to cut jobs because that minimum wage increase takes back on their profits. So they have to cut back on their jobs, and that leaves people on the streets. And yes, it does increase demand for jobs because now the minimum wage is higher, but the job market is shrinking, which isn't allowing them to get these jobs. It's also brought up that 58% of low-income families will get ahead with the minimum wage increase, but in fact 930,000 jobs will be lost because of a minimum wage increase.
Thank you, Republicans. Thank you. Now, I think in the future, when you have 10 seconds left, we'll just raise our hand a little bit like that, okay? Rio, your job.
Thank you, Professor Lohman. Okay, moving on to our next question. This question deals with Edward Snowden.